And we hadn't gone very far, and there was a serious firefight broke out, and three of our guys were killed right off the bat. Guys that were in spider holes or foxholes that came up out of the ground and shot our guys point blank range. I was a member of a parachute regiment, an airborne regiment. I was a ranger trained, parachute trained, and a member of one of the most famous units in the world in their infantry. Well, we went out with some guys from the 25th Division, which hosted us, since we didn't have anybody from our unit that had been to Vietnam before. So we got to go out with the unit that had been there several months, sent our officers out with their guys for 2 or 3 days to get an idea of how they did it. And then we came in and took care of the troops. Well, our non-commissioned officers, NCOs, went out and did the same thing. So that gave us 5 or 6 days of operational experience being hosted by somebody else. And then we were very quickly shuttled to the north to the city of Hue, where the Marine Corps had been providing the security for all of the bridges and checkpoints in the northern part of South Vietnam. And the Marines had been drawn to Quai Son during that time, heavily involved there. They brought us up there to kind of backfill and provide security for all of these checkpoints and to kind of help out with the increasing number of North Vietnamese soldiers coming into the South. Realized that where we were was only about 50 miles from Vietnam, from North Vietnam, and only maybe 25 miles from Laos, where these North Vietnamese soldiers were coming from. So we got into it pretty quick. We found out from intelligence sources that there were 5 North Vietnamese divisions surrounding this area, and we didn't have to go very far to find them. They were right there. So that's what we did. We conducted combat operations against them in a variety of ways, successful ones at that. And that's what we did. And that's what I did during my tour. During the first 6 or 7 months of my tour, I was a rifle company executive officer, second in command, and acted as the company commander on several operations because the commander was gone for some reason. And I was the rifle platoon leader early on, as a platoon leader of a platoon of about 40 guys. I commanded the company at some very interesting times, and where there were probably 80 or 90 of us in the company that were in the field at any one time. We were moving through a particularly scary area, meaning we didn't know, our maps were not very accurate. And so we had our whole company together moving through an area that we knew there were North Vietnamese soldiers there. One of my squads of about 8 guys go out on our left flank, meaning off to our left, to protect us from anything from that side. And we hadn't gone very far, and there was a serious firefight broke out between those guys and whoever it was, and it was North Vietnamese. And 3 of our guys were killed right off the bat, guys that were in spider holes or foxholes that came up out of the ground and shot our guys point blank range. That was a shock, because one of those guys was as much of a friend as an officer or an NCO can be. I was a friend of his, and his name was John Gingrey. And he was one of the guys that was killed. And it was devastating to us that we didn't have time to react. Those guys were gone before we could do anything about it. There's one other particularly troublesome story. Our unit was on top of this mountain that we had just taken from the North Vietnamese. I was ordered to take a patrol out to the very the end of this ridge that occupy an ambush position to avoid North Vietnamese people crawling up that ridge against us at night. Our sister company next door put together the patrol, and they were told to march down that ridge, set up on the end of this ridge to protect everybody's back up there. They walked out about 600-700 yards, and the people in their unit started telling them and whining about it, saying, "Hey, we've been beating ourselves to death on this mountain. Why don't we just flop down here and we'll pretend like we went out on the end of the mountain?" Well, they did. They plopped down, did the rucksack flop. They didn't put any security out there, nothing. And who comes up the ridge at night and walks right into them? And as a firefight erupts, a number of guys got killed that night. What that was a massive failure of leadership by someone acquiescing to the soldiers having a rough day. Well, everybody has a rough day, but there's a price you pay for that if you don't protect yourself. A lot of guys got killed that day. I remember for this rest of my Army career, which went on forever. I still tell the story because it's so important about balancing things within what the soldiers want and need and what the mission is. and he failed all the way across the board. A bunch of guys got killed. It was a sad day. That guy was my friend. He was my roommate at the very start of our tour of Vietnam. So anyway, that's a sad story, but one that resonates today.
Everyone that you ever loved was in the crowd. Who crucified the one who talked a bit too